AI MedTech Dialogue.
All right, awesome. Welcome to the AI and MedTech panel discussion. We've got a great set of panelists here. All walks of life and diverse backgrounds, diverse companies. Our goal here is to provide as much engaging content and kind of challenge each other's ideas. We're going to touch on topics that are related to AI, but through a variety of channels. And we would love to get your participation in it as well. And so we'll work our way through different topics, and then we will open up kind of brief Q&A sessions in between topics for anybody that is in the audience and that would like to participate. We'd love to hear from you as well. So we'll start with a bit of brief introductions from everybody, and then we'll jump into our topics. Andreas, in our planning for this, actually brought up a good point around, what is our theme here? What do we want to cover? And he brought up a theme around busting myths and truths in AI, in MedTech, and also in the general MedTech kind of industry as well. And so that's our theme for today. And yeah, we can kick things off with the intros. So myself, I'm from Zapyrus. We are a sales intelligence tool, actionable sales intelligence tool powered by AI, built specifically for the MedTech industry. And so we're in a good position here to be able to pull some real world data in MedTech to act as a foundation for our talking points today. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. And then I'll pass it off to Maria. Here.
Hi, thanks. So I don't sell a product except myself that's powered by AI, because if we don't have that now in our selling title, it's, we're too boring. But I am a serial entrepreneur. I started a couple of businesses. One I exited 2 years ago. It was a CRO. And through that, we had a very strong European regulatory expertise and a big team. And I got very interested in the SAMD, the software as medical devices, and through that it was a natural progression to understanding AI and how it's finding its place in the medical device technology. And after my exit, I went into focusing solely on investments, and now I support small and mid-size startups with both cash and competence, as I like to say. So a little bit briefly.
Thank you so much, Maria. So my name is Benjamin, or Ben Meany. I'm manager for digital software and AI regulation at MedTech Europe. For those of you who are a little bit more or less familiar with MedTech Europe, we are the EU trade association representing manufacturers of both medical devices, in vitro diagnostic medical devices, and also digital health tools and solutions. We effectively bring together more than 180 companies, which are primarily manufacturers of these devices and digital health tools and solutions, but we also represent a large spate of national trade associations. Think of the MedTech Europes in the EU member state capitals and beyond. So we have roughly 56 national trade associations, really together representing the hundreds and thousands of MedTech innovative startups, small businesses, medium businesses, and of course those large European and international players. So really looking forward to the discussion today, because we have a number of startups on the panel and we really have a variety of expertise here. So really looking forward to the discussion.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Andreas Forsland. I'm the founder and CEO of Cognition. We are a brain-computer interface company that uses AI to augment intelligence for individuals with severe disabilities such as stroke, ALS, neurodegenerative conditions. And so our use of AI is multifaceted in the sense that we use it in a sort of small models for processing and decoding neural signals, but then we also can build full digital twins of the disabled patients or subjects to mimic how they look at the world and how they would talk and think, so that it makes it easier for them to interact more quickly with the people and places and things around them. So we're based in Santa Barbara, California, operations in Toronto. We're a venture-backed startup. We're currently commercial with our platform. We're selling it into research hospitals around the US and Canada, and we'll be rolling out the core platform to accelerate clinical SAMD applications within neurology, including international customers in 2025.
My name is Ziad, and I'm one of the founders and CEO of MindH. We've developed what we call a brain-computer interface for remote monitoring and neurorehabilitation of patients with brain disorders, with an initial focus on multiple sclerosis. I'm a computer scientist by training, so neurotechnology was not my cup of tea, as we say. My mum was late-stage diagnosed with MS and regrettably didn't receive proper treatment, so I ended up pursuing a PhD in neurotechnology, the big hope that I'd help my mum regain mobility, or at least better manage her disease. And right after the PhD, my co-founder and I kind of decided to roll up our sleeves and start MindH. I'm pleased to share that we've already begun a multi-site and international clinical trial whose purpose is to validate and get this over the line between America, the UK. We also have sites in Australia. So yeah, and that's all about me. Over to you.
Lovely. So good afternoon, everyone. Yusuf Halwa, CEO and co-founder of Fluid AI. So ultimately what we do at Fluid AI is we enable data-driven based surgical patient recovery. So patients coming out of surgery, we've built hardware and digital solutions that enable us to monitor the patient recovery, to enable us to understand how the patient condition is evolving, to build data sets and models that enable the healthcare provider to understand the patients that are healthy, enabling early discharge, and the patients that are at risk of developing complications, and to enable early intervention. We work with a variety of clinical partners all over the globe, from the top leading institutions, from Mayo Clinic to Cleveland Clinic to a Unity Health, the 3 best ranked hospitals, a number of other facilities. And we also work with our top medical partners like Medtronic and J&J. And as a company, when it comes to AI, we utilize AI where we have our own data set using our sensory solution and sensory technology. So we have a proprietary data set there, and we also combine data sets related to patients and understanding their charts and their records, and how that could be utilized to build models that enable us to give the next patient the best care possible. So excited to be on this panel and to discuss our journey and some of the challenges. And
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So I want to kick things off with injecting a layer of, I guess, optimism in MedTech, and especially in this kind of niche field that we're in. So the first myth is that there's no funding in MedTech. So hands up if you heard that in the past 2 years. All right, see, a lot of hands up. Great. Some of it is true to some degree. From 2023, off of the back of COVID-19, there was an injection of cash during the COVID period. In 2023, we saw a massive dip. However, since the start of this year, I'll reference off some numbers here. So in total, and not counting revenue, 2023, we saw $18 billion of investment that went into MedTech of all therapeutic areas and technology types. Year to date, as of Q3 this year, we're seeing $34 billion into MedTech this year. SAMD Digital Health specifically made up 38% of that investment in Q3 of this year. And this Q3 is the highest funded quarter since COVID-19 pandemic. And that is also supported by the growth in merger and acquisition volume, which in this quarter we saw the highest volume since COVID-19 as well. And so let's just bust that myth now. we're on the right track, and we're doing well in terms of the industry. And so based off of that, I want to lead into the topic of, I guess, what it takes to succeed from an idea all the way to commercial, specifically in the AI in the MedTech space. So the question I have is, what level of capital does it take to get a software as a medical device company or an AI-based MedTech company from an idea stage to commercialization? And maybe, Andreas, you can help kick us off on that, and then we'll work our way through.
Well, I'd say the TLDR on that is I could send you a URL if you just contact me on LinkedIn. I'll send you a URL to a paper. So Starfish Medical just recently published a paper on this exact topic, which is very helpful. But the average diagnostic device requires at least $25 million USD in funding to get to commercialization. That's not to commercialize, but to get to commercialization. SAMD is averaging around 3.8 million USD. So in the sense, like if you're a venture capitalist, it's like hardware's hard, and it's very hard to deliver software without hardware. So there's a complication there that you just have to deal with regarding to your funding and assumptions. But if you're a digital health investor, you said, well, gosh, I could invest in 10 SAMD applications for the price of one diagnostic. Your risk profile on your portfolio looks quite different, right? And so, anyway, that's my perspective. So, one of the reasons why we pivoted a little bit from a point solution into a platform was for that reason, is that there are over 400 different neurological conditions that are listed on the NIH website that could require SAMD applications or devices. But you're talking about trillions of dollars, not trillions, hundreds of billions of dollars to be invested to address all of those needs, when really you could start to get at some common form factors, some common sensor typologies, some common methods and frameworks that could get to addressing sort of a general purpose hardware solutions, where you could minimize your hardware investment requirements, and you could put more money into the actual diagnostics and therapeutics and software delivery versus kind of reinventing the wheel on a whole bunch of bespoke hardware. And so that's kind of what we're doing at Cognition, is we've developed a hardware platform that unlocks an abundance of software because it's a more capital efficient strategy to make a huge difference.
Right, and scaling becomes different too, right, between software and hardware.
Yeah, like your corresponding business model would be very different. Like Mile and H, you're a software focused company.
Yeah, and Maria.
I'd like to add something to that. So if we hear 3 million compared to 30 already sounds, like a bargain, right? And then we spoke about it before and said, 3 million, it's so much. What do you do with that money? And I said, no, but 3 million is supposed to be little. But if I think we have all the opportunity now to bring that 3 million down. If we can't make that become less, we are really not taking advantage of AI in itself, because if it's all about automatization, optimization, so the whole idea that if we want to use AI also as a way to democratize and boost innovation in an ideal world, and not even ideal, I think realistic, we should be able to bring that below 1 million to even further boost innovation, because there's a lot of, coming from the CRO business, I know that a large part of that 3 million goes away also in clinical evaluation, and definitely there's a lot of tools that are already coming out that really helps to decentralize the clinical research and really improve the costs that you have to spend on the clinical development process. So I think it looks optimistic, but it can get even better.
I would just sort of add, if I could add to that a little bit, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, is this notion of, Tom Gruber, who is the co-founder of Siri and sold it to Apple and Steve Jobs, he's on our board, and he's also an AI advisor to our engineering team. He's a humanist in the sense of his application of AI, and you can sort of fall into two kind of camps. You're sort of the cyborg camp or the AI to assist humans camp. And so he's more on the humanistic side, and as are we.
I was going to say cyborg, all the way, cyborg.
There's going to be a mix of both, but he actually affectionately, there's this notion of like, instead of Big Brother, the notion of like an analogy of like, could AI, the sense of a general art AI, could it be more of a big mother, right? You know, so the notion of like mothers tend to mother you, right? And they can also adapt from a reactive care model to a proactive care model.
Yeah.
Right, in a sense of like today's use of AI is mostly just trying to get a handle on what is the current state and how do we, you know, fix what's broken.
Yeah.
Versus could AI actually transform the proactive side, right? And like, does a proactive AI, a big mother, need to show up in a medical, like a regulated device?
Yeah.
Or could like a thin layer of an aspect of Big Mother's, an echo of Big Mother shows up in AI in consumer devices, or in just, you know, your Bose, you know, noise canceling earbuds, you know, all of a sudden have like a little sort of aspect of Big Mother that's looking out for your wellness.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see that aspect as well. Like our product is not to the patient, but we also see aspects of that proactive versus reactive approach in development. So it's interesting, it bleeds across, it's agnostic from that sense. So I want to hear from, Yusuf?
Yeah, so what I'll add to what you've mentioned on the hardware and the software side, when considering the investment that has been made, hardware by definition requires bigger investment because you are building a real tool that exists, and to do that you need to invest into R&D, you need facilities, there is a regulatory pathway that is almost fully defined for this process, and then you go into studies and data collection. So the amount of steps that it takes to commercialize the solution is longer. And when you reach that point of commercialization, you're typically entering with a large enough body of evidence that enables the commercial process to start and to take off. With software companies, we've seen a variety of different companies require different size of investments depending on how deep they are. So let's take a few examples. Do they require clinical study to validate the efficacy of their work? If they do, then there is a clinical study cost that scales. Now, is the clinical study based on retrospective data, or are they going to be conducting a prospective study recruiting patients? And at which point they are limited by the ability of the center to recruit patients. Are they recruiting patients from the general public, or is it a specialized group? And with every single one of these decisions, the amount of capital required scales significantly. And at the same time, is it regulated? Is it not regulated? To build the R&D, aside from this study, does it require a specific data set that is available to the public? Or do they need to go and acquire this data set patient by patient or data point by data point? The more of these answers and the more specialized you are, the higher the level of capital investment there is. And ultimately, yes, you could reach commercialization with very little capital and start to test the market. But the easier it is to access the market and the less IP you have, the more likely that there will be other competitors, and the more likely that you will struggle once you reach the point of commercialization. And that, to me, is the challenge with a lot of these companies, is we are measuring them by, are they able to reach a point where they could commercialize, versus how successful they are when they enter the market, and how much capital is required from the point of market entry to the point of success.
Yeah, for sure. And Ziad, do you have anything to add to that from your perspective?
Yeah, as far as mine and H is concerned, we are a software company, as mentioned. Perhaps just to shine some light on the technology and the use of AI before I talk about the cost. So we've developed games. Those games would literally simulate your brain non-invasively, look at those responses. First and foremost, use AI to translate those responses into sort of digital biomarkers, telling your doctors about disease progression and helping them assess treatment effectiveness at home. And more importantly, I think this is the exciting bit of the work, which is you try to create a bespoke game-based treatment plan whose purpose is to enhance cognitive and physical abilities. And that's where sort of AI helps us, automate that process, create the right prescription for the right patient at the right time, sort of that, personalized medicine. So it's not really the cherry on top of the cake. We're really using AI day in, day out to help us provide the right prescription to the right patient. Speaking of course, I mean, I would say 3 million is really just a drop in the ocean. It doesn't move the needle, does it? I mean, now it's like, initially we were a bit naive. We thought we would need like 2 million to basically run the clinical trial and get this over the line. But you start to sort of like talk to other hospitals in America and Australia and the UK, and then the cost spikes, and it's like 3 million is nothing really, it's just a drop in the ocean. I would say you would certainly need, unequivocally, around 5 to 6 million just to run a really good trial, 300, 400 patients, and be able to sort of tick the boxes of the FDA and those regulators. I mean, this is just a software as a medical device, just to be clear. If we're talking about sort of hardware, then mate, like, you need like the 25 million that Andreas has raised to be able to get it over the line.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. And so you guys touched up on the topic of regulation. And Yusuf, you mentioned structured regulation, been there for a very long time for traditional hardware, medical devices, IVD diagnostic systems, things like that. With the emergence of software as a medical device, right, regulation has to kind of update and keep up and figure out where that line is drawn, right, between a pure SAMD versus a digital health platform or a patient tracking system. And so what do you guys think about how regulation will dictate AI and MedTech investments over the next 2 to 3 years? Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of discussion on this already, and I think my response has changed 5 or 6 times throughout the past 48 hours. I had a sort of pre-idea of what I would say as a regulatory expert, but I mean, first and foremost, regulation, and I say this in the greatest of affections for the European Union with which I work, but European regulation does not always keep up with software and technological development. And I mean, this is a fact, and this is the issue of trying to regulate a technology that legislators don't understand, that they haven't had sufficient time in developing any form of expertise in, and particularly when they're not talking to industry leaders or those individuals who actually program the software, who build the software, who integrate it into their products and their offerings, which ultimately are the offerings affecting citizens and patients on the market. What we have seen, of course, and I don't want to do a hand-raising exercise again, but I understand many will be familiar, since you're in the EU, you're in Malta currently, that you're probably quite familiar with the medical devices regulation and the in vitro diagnostic medical devices regulation. These are our sort of North Star regulations in Europe, which many would argue make it a little bit more turbulent to get your product to market. I heard a lot about the numbers going up and up and up in terms of commercialization. And then if you're in the EU, you're also involving notified bodies, which means independent audits, and by extension means getting that expertise for those audits, which means increased costs again. So while we're trying to increase costs, I can probably add an extra layer onto that. But the most important thing when you consider MDR and IVDR is firstly understanding your checklist of those regulatory requirements that you are supposed to meet. Primarily if we're talking about software and AI medical devices, we will be undergoing third-party conformity assessments, so you will involve a notified body. When we're talking about AI, you're also going to be subject to the Artificial Intelligence Act. And that is sort of a copy-paste of the logic of the MDR with specific nuances for artificial intelligence technology. So that, of course, will increase costs again, which as a result will require even greater investment into those companies trying to permeate the EU market. It is worth it. In the end, it's 460 plus million people. It is worth it, but it is a bit of a turbulent challenge. So what I would advise is not perhaps wait and see, but get your heads together and understand those requirements and ask yourselves, is it worth it? And if it is, prepare yourselves for compliance. Don't wait until the last minute. Really get out in front of that compliance journey to save yourself costs and get your products towards patients.
I would also like to, because you're talking about costs, and that we could spend the rest of the 20 minutes on sort of what does cost look like for this kind of stuff over the next 2 years. And I think with inflation and other things, the cost of money, you're going to probably see a 20 to 30% uptick in sort of the cost of these things just because of the value of money is going down. And so you're going to have eye-popping rounds that are going to be like, how did they raise $500 million? And it's like, well, that $500 million was actually like $100 million a couple of years ago. But when it comes to the AI, I think there's a bunch of hidden costs and assumptions. I think, ChatGPT and others have made it remarkably easy for the general consumer to just do things with basic prompt engineering. However, there is a cost, right? And so, when you're building consumer technology, you have certain financial models like software as a service that could absorb some of the compute cost of either cloud or edge-based computing into the cost of the service delivery. However, if you think about reimbursement coding as an issue, there's not a lot of precedent regarding reimbursable SaaS models. It's fixed cost, you buy the device once, you might have consumables or other things, but there really isn't a world today that has an abundance of recurring subscription models that are fundable through regulated. So I think there is a little bit of a twist of, think about your business model as you're in parallel, as you're working through product development and regulatory and clinicals, because you might find yourself into a place where you've sort of navigated all the gauntlets to get the product done, and then you have a product that basically you can't commercialize because it's too expensive.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
We were speaking before, Ben and I also, how it is in the European Union. We have actually 3 legislations converging now over the next few years. So, of course, it's the MDR, it's the AI Act, and it's the Data Act, right? And while they are mutually supporting each other and tend to not contradict each other, that's a good thing. But the implementation timelines also sort of constrict one thing to happen in a logistical or logical sequence. So that it's true, we will continue to have a turbulent period. If I say the next 4 years, I mean, probably everybody stands up and leave. But realistically, if we're speaking about what it's going to look like with the change towards the MDR and the understanding, specifically talking about AI as a medical device, it's not a clear path forward because there's so many different stakeholders involved, and I think the decision makers need still a lot of education, and that's where your work is so important also to come in. But being a service provider or having been a service provider and supporting medical device manufacturers to overcome these hurdles and remain in the European Union, it's hopeful, but at the same time, it's a little bit discouraging. But again, planning and having enough capital to sort of ride out this storm, so to say, it's probably a good advice.
Yeah, it's just like, because we do have a horse in the race. We have an EU sort of company with a subsidiary in America. I think what's important really, and with those sort of regulations is, what's to say here? We should not throw the baby out with the bathwater, i.e., those regulations should not hinder technological developments. And I think what you get to witness and observe after this new AI Act and those regulations, a lot of people are just going to America because things are just much easier. So I think it's important really that we go back to the drawing board and look at those regulations. Are they, helping people, innovate, or are they just blocking them and acting sort of like as roadblocks? I would say, yeah, we're not saying let's deregulate those things. What we're trying to say is just get the right end of this. It's just like, find that sort of middle ground and make sure that you're not stopping those people from innovating.
Just a very quick point. I really agree with that because, I mean, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's a perfect example. I don't believe that's what European legislators have been trying to do. What we need to understand, and this is where really industry comes in, and this is what we as MedTech Europe need to hear from our manufacturers, including products that aren't yet on the market. We need to hear, what works in regulation, which you don't have to say a lot. That's not a demand. But really, we need to understand, not from a negative perspective, but from an optimistic and an ambitious perspective, where are potential enablers? You know, what are we not doing in Europe that has been done in jurisdictions like the United States? And where is there room to update and consider the future of the EU's regulatory system to really bring back a bit more global competitiveness, and also ensure that devices like you are all manufacturing and trying to market are marketed in the EU and reach patients, because that's the most important thing for us.
Awesome. I'm going to pause here and take any questions from the audience, maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
We can't see you.
I'll give it to Alex.
Thank you, Kevin. Quick question, and this is kind of mostly probably for the entrepreneurs, but if you could have a magic wand and wave it and get rid of kind of any of the big burdens that you've seen in your journey, what would it be?
Thanks, Alex.
If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and reduce any big burdens, is it, or get rid of any big burdens?
To the entrepreneurs.
All of my answers are politically incorrect, so I don't know.
You know, it's I'll throw in my 2 cents. So I shared this earlier, but it's like I'm on year 10 of what I thought was a 2-year startup journey. So you know, I've learned a lot in those 10 years, and I would sort of say, you know, it truly is about the journey. You know, so on one hand, I'd say, well, all the problems I encountered that I didn't expect, I would love to wipe those away. But I wouldn't actually be who I am today if I hadn't had to grind through those situations and find creative solutions to get around those problems, over those problems, prioritize things. So you shouldn't sort of be wishful about removal of problems. You should just be actually thankful that you have those problems, because in the end of the day, sometimes those problems are just the universe telling you that there's a better way for you to do what you're doing, or another way you should be doing it. So if a customer doesn't like your product and you're hard-willed about like, no, you have to like my product, you have to maybe step back and say, well, what is it, right? And maybe you haven't listened to the customer well enough, you know? And so sometimes I would sort of say, all of that said, as a CEO, sometimes letting go of yourself to say, I want to get out of the way of this, that's an issue that a lot of CEOs have a hard time doing.
Absolutely.
I would say, I mean, I was probably the biggest burden to the entire, and I think coming back to yourself also, like this incredible focus on that there's some time. You have 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. If you start to approach 10 years, you have already failed your initial target. So in hindsight, it's that I mean, in the end, being, you know, putting an unnecessary amount of pressure on ourselves, and because in hindsight, like you say, sometimes time needs to appear or pass for this right person to come in, for a technology to develop, for a need to occur. So in my case, that event was COVID. It changed the entire business. You know, we were a small consulting business. Nobody used digital marketing before COVID. It was all network, traveling to congresses. It meant like enormous amount of investment for a small company. But overnight, the entire customer base was at the tip of our finger. So, yeah.
Yeah, and if I just added another thing, it's just, I think we've hit at a few points here today, is the value of a community with mentors, I think, is really important, because, you know, I have a really remarkable network now, right? Like if I were going to create another company, it would be amazing. But you end up like Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. You just sort of find a fellowship along the way, and you stumble and figure it out. But what's fascinating is the role of AI today. Like if I had ChatGPT today, like when I started, I could have at least been more efficient with decision making earlier, because I would have had more confidence. Even with hallucinations, I would have had more confidence making decisions in times where I didn't have access to experts.
Yeah, correct. I think sort of the problems and the challenges and the obstacles are inevitable, inescapable. It's just part of the journey. And there is a profound statement that I'd heard this in the past, which is there will always be rainy days. You just have to learn how to dance in the rain. So I think as a CEO, wherever, it's building the next big thing, you just have to learn how to dance in the rain. But going back to the question, I think the only thing I wish I'd done differently, or I wish I had, is sort of like compressing time. You want to, I mean, as a startup, your biggest enemy is time, is not money. So you wish you'd done more in a short amount of time. So that's always sort of like, I could have done a bit more. I could have done it quicker. But then again, you go back to sort of like, it's a journey, isn't it? So we just have to embrace it. And you build that muscle and it's gonna be all right.
Yeah, I mean, from our position, similar to everyone on the panel, I agree, it's a journey. If there is one thing I could, if I could wish it could happen faster or change, is the amount and time spent in bureaucracy, in regulation and quality with medical devices. It takes an extensive amount of time to do anything, which over time becomes draining, whether you're working on a study, whether you're working through a procurement cycle. You're always starting in months and years. So that's why a 2-year is a 10-year journey, is because every single step is much, much longer when it's happening in the medical industry. So I hope to see efficiency improvements, and we see this with different hospitals, centers, regulatory bodies. There's still a long, long way to go.
Did you want to add something, or?
I was just gonna lob a topic, a little thought grenade in the room here. So,
Okay.
Just a little controversy. So, we talked about facts and myths, but like talk about hype versus reality. So, there's the role of AI, and I think there's a sense of like wonder and curiosity and dreaming about like, what if, right? Like, what if I could do this? And that is really exciting, but then there's others who have a bullhorn that get a lot of public awareness, especially in my industry, around what the future of AI is going to be. And the future of AI is like, it's going to cure everything, right? But then there's like, today, within like the current applications that are going through like the FDA, like what are the actual AI applications that are going through the FDA today versus like, I'm going to give sight to the blind, and I'm going to help people walk, and I'm going to send people to Mars with like chips in their brains, and I'm going to remotely control them and put digital payloads to save their life, and it's going to be like longevity. They're going to live forever, and humanity's never going to die because of AI. Like, let's talk about like some reality.
That's not real?
It is real. It is real. It's just not evenly distributed. We'll just say it's like there's like 3 people in the world that have access to that. Yeah. So
it's just like, it's such a brilliant point. I mean, you think of it like that Sebastianism. I mean, they've got this myth in Portugal, like, which is this, the King Sebastian would return and sort of solve all the problems. I think a lot of people just misunderstand what AI can do, and they think of AI sort of that Sebastianism, or like it's gonna, solve all the problems. I would say, as Andreas mentioned earlier, I think it's important to know what AI can do for you, but it's also more important, I guess, to understand the limitations and so I think we need a bit more education here, because a lot of people tend to think, oh, I've just put AI in it. Like, you'll be pulling the rabbits out of the hat, as we say, and it's going to create the magic. It's not.
Go ahead.
Just quickly, because it is a very good point, hype versus reality, because I mean, when we're engaging with legislators in discussions on regulation, we were discussing cybersecurity regulatory coverage of connected medical devices. And I won't name the show that this is referenced from, because there'll probably be royalties due as a result. But there was a scene where a pacemaker was hacked, And it led an advisor to tell me, wow, I saw the show last night. We have to regulate the cybersecurity of connected pacemakers. And I said, we do already. Why are we even talking about this already? But it's a classic example of people who aren't so knowledgeable of the topic and who see something, and then suddenly the debate becomes completely into the clouds, and that's what we're faced with day in, day out in the Brussels arena, which is trying to keep things grounded in what the technology does now, instead of regulating for a very out there what-if scenario, which could be 30, 40, 50 years from now. So.
Yeah. And so we only have a couple minutes left. Time flew by. And so I would definitely encourage everybody to connect with the folks here. Very resourceful folks, and there's so many topics that we can dive really deep into the space. And yeah, Yusuf, did you have something? Okay. And so in our last couple minutes together, I guess maybe from each one of you, what's a message that you want to put out there to the audience, to the MedTech community, as it relates to MedTech and AI and the future of things in this space?
What I would say is ultimately AI is a tool, and I would like people to focus on outcomes and what they're delivering when it comes to healthcare, what they're delivering to the patient or the healthcare provider or their primary stakeholder in the healthcare system. AI is just a tool to get to outcomes and to get improvements and to move things forward. So just keep that in mind. It's not AI for AI, it's AI for patients.
I mean, I would go back to my opening remarks that I think we all should sort of, have dreams and wishes around forget AI for a minute, but what technology can do to like make all of our lives better, and how it can be invisible and just adaptive to what we do in our daily active lives, whilst remaining secure and all these other things. So the notion of like Big Mother as a concept of reactive and proactive care, that's a really big topic. You kind of get into the world of like general intelligence, which could be kind of almost like a disembodied godhead of like, it's a digital god, for atheists who are really interested in some other bigger power that's giving us, guidance and support, other than through a medium. So you're like, well, okay, if it's a digital god or a digital mom, then none of us individually as individuals or companies or startups can build that, right? Like, we're all building little voxels, like little components to a bigger vision, which is in service of improving the quality of life for humanity, and saying each and every one of you will have some implementation of AI. But then it's like, what's your flavor of AI, right? Is it sort of a cyborgian, like I'm going to do AI to, at all costs? We were talking yesterday about Facebook, and like their whole ethos was move fast and break things, but they didn't realize that they could have actually, if they had added one more guiding principle to that, which is, move fast, break things, and don't hurt people.
Yeah.
Then they might have grown slower, but they also wouldn't have had all the catastrophes associated with the Meta business, right?
Thanks.
And so the notion of like, what is your guiding principle for the implementation of AI that is going to be like a forever principle?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Maria?
Yeah. So I want to bridge on to that and also say I think we are all, especially if we are in the medtech industry, and if we looked at SAMD, we are all collectively contributing to, I think, the intent of what AI will mean for us, whether we're working in regulation or in development or in manufacturing. Because it's such a specific kind of technology, right? That it's goes beyond anything that we have done before, and it's much big. It's bigger than any technology that we have faced in terms of regulation. We are like, do we walk pair in pair? Who runs first? Do we regulate in big brushstrokes and then go back and provide the granularity and the details? Nobody knows, and it's conversations like this, meeting with the regulators, meeting with the innovators, meeting with the manufacturers, that we are really in this together. And then it's the best approach that I can think of. That sometimes I feel disencouraged because it's overwhelming. If we make mistakes, they can be catastrophical. We have all heard about it. And at the same time, you don't want to lose the optimism and the hope with what it can bring. And I told Andreas yesterday, I go back and I just meditate and say, I'm just going to focus on positive intent and hope that, just by doing that also sometimes we can, reach the regulators in Brussels that take whatever they see at homeland at face value rather than listening to the experts. So, yeah. What do you say, Ben?
And really quickly, we'll go to Ben and then Ziad.
I realize the time, so I'm going to be really, really brief. I want to come to a word you use, community, because that is something that you felt was lacking perhaps at the beginning, is this already sort of walked path towards getting your product to market and really assisting you and probably lowering costs and lowering effort that could have been best spent elsewhere. But there is a community, of course, in Brussels, around the European Union, to help companies navigate the turbulent, I won't say impossible, the turbulent regulatory frameworks that you have to deal with. And one more point is something that we're faced with day in, day out difficulty, is conveying the expertise on how the technology works to the regulators. So that is really what you, as the sort of digital innovative technologies, you as those developers and manufacturers, talk to your regulators. Don't wait for trade associations, just really go to your regulator and help them understand how the technology works, because that stops legislation that just doesn't properly understand how technology works, and that is the way we stifle innovation.
What I would say, I think as a final message, I mean, I'm a glass half full person, so I'm pretty optimistic. I think AI will certainly unequivocally, pave the way for a new era for medical device companies. So I think we should certainly embrace this sort of new buzz and around AI. And as a general piece of advice, I would say medical devices and MedTech in general, it's pretty hard. So just have that sort of determination, that thing between your teeth, and never give in, and it's going to be all right.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all, panelists, and thank you to the audience for tuning in and the excellent questions. Thank you.